Put the bottle down and step away from that bed, the man rasped. He was trying to aim a Colt at me, but fever had made his hand useless. Lamplight shone on sweat, blood at the corner of his mouth, and the iron frame of the bed he was braced against. The room smelled of wet wool, cedar smoke, and the camphor packet I had carried 6 muddy miles through sleet. I shut the door with my heel and kept walking. "If you mean to shoot me," I said, "do it before I open my satchel. Once I smell what your lungs are doing, I'll be too annoyed to die politely." The gun lowered an inch. When I reached the bed and laid 2 fingers against his wrist, he stared at me with the dazed intensity of a man looking through the present and seeing something else entirely. "My wife," he whispered, "had your exact same kind eyes. That was how I met Beckett Hale, alone on his ranch beneath Crowtooth Ridge, with rain striking the roof, fever burning through him, and death sitting close enough to hear us both. Before I go farther, settle in wherever you're listening tonight, and tell us in the comments where the dark has found you. Stories sound better when we know who's by the fire with us. Then come back to that room, because by the time dawn reached the ridge, neither Beckett Hale nor I belonged to the life we'd woken in. He had been dosed with laudanum so heavily his breathing was barely remembering itself. An uncorked bottle stood beside the bed. "Who gave you this?" I asked. A boy answered from the kitchen doorway. "Dr. Bellamy. Mr. Creed said it would keep the pain down." He was a narrow, freckled thing of 14 with mud on his boots and his hat crushed in both hands. "You're Eli?" I said. He nodded. "I fetched you." I poured the laudanum into the wash basin. His eyes widened. "Ma'am, that cost money. So does a coffin." I turned to him. "Boil water. Tear up the cleanest sheet you can spare. If this house has mustard powder, I need it." He flew to the task. "Boys raised by cruel men move with caution. Boys raised by decent men move with hope." Eli moved with hope. Beckett caught my sleeve. "Don't stay," he said thickly. "Road'll wash by morning. You can discuss roads when you stop coughing blood." I made a mustard plaster, forced willow bark tea into him between coughing fits, rubbed his chest with camphor, and built the stove hot enough to sweat the chill out of the room. When Eli went to the barn for blankets, I noticed a paper nailed crooked to the inside of the front door. Notice of transfer pending. South Spring, lower pasture, and residence to be surrendered by noon the next day if debt remained unsettled. It bore county language and Silas Creed's signature. Not the bank's. His. When Eli returned, I held up the paper. "How long?" "Since yesterday." He glanced toward the bed. Mr. Creed said if Mr. Hale couldn't ride by noon, there was no use letting good land wait on a dying man. Beckett opened his eyes. "Boy, I told you not to fetch help. And I told you bleeding on the pillow stopped being private." Eli swallowed. "Beg pardon." I dragged the chair close to the bed. "Mr. Hale, I can leave powders and instructions and go. That is the easy road for both of us. But if I stay, I need the truth. Is this debt real?" He looked at the rafters while rain tapped the roof. "It started real," he said. "Drought year. Lost calves. Creed covered feet. Interest kept climbing. Interest doesn't climb by itself." His eyes came back to mine. "No." A knock sounded. Certain. Unhurried. Eli went pale. "That's him." Silas Creed stood on the porch in a dark coat that had never seen labor, rain on his hat brim, silver watch chain bright against his vest. 2 riders waited in the yard behind him. "Evening," he said pleasantly. "I heard Beckett had company." "You heard right." His gaze moved over my shoulder toward the bed. "Then perhaps you can help him understand my generosity. I've no wish to press a dying man, only to keep good land from going to waste." "Most generous men," I said, "wait for the fever to break before measuring the curtains." One rider snorted. Silas's smile cooled. "You're the widow, Rowan," he said. "The one who sells roots and courage from a wagon. And you are the man signing county papers with his own name as if the law resigned." He looked past me. "Noon tomorrow, Beckett. Ride in and sign fair. Fail me, and the spring, pasture, and house are mine." Beckett tried to sit up and nearly folded from weakness. I put him back against the pillow. "Come tomorrow," I said to Silas. You can hear his answer when he's got the breath to say it. Silas studied me. "Careful, Mrs. Rowan. Pity gets expensive in this valley." "I haven't pitied a man in years," I said. "But I know a bully when he drips on my floor." His smile disappeared. He turned and stepped into the rain. I bolted the door behind him, and that was the moment the easy part of my life ended. By dawn, Beckett's fever had broken enough for his skin to feel human again. In daylight, the house looked poorer than rumor, but cleaner than spite had allowed. Everything patched, scrubbed, and kept going by stubborn hands. A small photograph sat on the mantel. June Hale. Calm face. Kind eyes. Not mine, not really. But I understood why grief had reached for the resemblance. When Beckett woke, I handed him broth and said, "Tell me why Silas Creed thinks he owns your breath." He drank, then stared into the cup a long time before answering. "My wife's name was June," he said. "She was carrying our first child the winter she died. Storm came hard. She started bleeding after sundown. I saddled to fetch Bellamy. Creed was here buying steers. Said the North Pass was suicide. Said no doctor would make it back. Anyway, June asked me 3 times to ride. I listened to him. The room held still around us. In the morning? I asked. In the morning, he said. I buried my wife and a son who never got a full breath. The pain in his face was old enough to have become furniture. You think he let that go? Beckett asked. Creed has been collecting pieces of this place ever since. I looked out the window at the wet yard, the barn, the empty lane. My husband died 3 years ago in a mining blast. They brought me his watch and called that comfort. My boy died the same winter, fever in a quarantined camp. I had the medicine. 3 town councilmen stood across the road and told me a grieving woman had no business deciding such matters. By the time they let me pass, he knew me, but he couldn't swallow. Beckett's grip tightened around the mug. Since then, I said, I have a poor opinion of men who use rules to keep good people buried. He was quiet. Then, that why you keep moving? Yes. To keep working? To keep from staying. Something gentled in his face. Not pity. Recognition. He told me the spring on his south pasture never ran dry, not even in August, and Silas had been buying land all the way down to the rail survey line. He says it's for cattle, Beckett said. I say it's for the depot when it comes. Everything thirsty in this valley will bend toward that water. Then we don't let him have it. Yes. I'm offended by the sound of surrender this early in the day. That nearly got a smile out of him. By noon I had him walking from bed to porch and back, cursing me under his breath for making him wear a blanket. I used the daylight to see what shape the ranch was in. 3 mares, 2 milk cows, chickens with bad manners, tack mended with neat, clever repairs. Nothing wasteful, nothing broken by laziness. A bay mare pinned her ears when I neared her stall. I laid a hand on her neck, spoke low, and waited until the tremor left her skin. Beckett watched from the fence. That mare throws everyone but me, he said. She won't throw me. How do you know? She dislikes fools. We understand each other. That made him smile for real, quick and unwilling. Nora Pike came near noon with bread, butter, and fear plain in her eyes. She was a widow with windburned cheeks and the habit of wiping her hands on her apron when nervous. Heard Mr. Hale was poorly, she said. He is, I answered. He'll mend quicker if the valley remembers he exists. Color rose in her face. Some of us remembered. Silas owns my note too. She set the basket down and lowered her voice. If you need a place to hide, I've an old lambing camp in the cottonwoods. Thank you, Beckett said quietly. Before she left, Nora gave us the one thing I wanted most and least. News. Creed went to see the county clerk this morning. And Dr. Bellamy. That settled the matter. I'm riding to town, I said. Beckett straightened from the fence. No. Yes. The note's wrong, and I'd like to know how wrong before noon makes us homeless. He'll expect that. Then he'll be pleased by his own accuracy. There's a stage east at 4, he said. You could be on it. No one would blame you. That struck harder than if he had begged me to stay. I thought of my boy on the camp cot. I thought of June Hale asking a husband to ride. There are worse things than being blamed, I said. Being left is one of them. Something changed in his face then. He stopped trying to send me away. If you had been standing where I stood, with one road leading to safety and the other to a man everybody else had already given up on, what would you have done? Would you have trusted him? Or would you have taken the clean escape while you still could? Tell me true. I'd like to know whether courage looks clearer from the outside. Before Beckett could answer, Eli came running from the yard. The clerk's burning papers, he gasped. How do you know? I ran an errand to town. Saw old ledgers stacked by the stove. Heard Mr. Creed say nobody needed dead accounts cluttering up a clean county. I pulled on my gloves. Saddle the bay. You are not riding that mare, Beckett said. He whistled once. and the bay came to him at once, ears forward, all her temper gone at the sound of his voice. He passed me the reins. 1 hour there, he said. 1 hour back. If I'm not on the porch when you return, go to Nora Pike's camp and do not stop. It's a poor time to start ordering me. It's the only way I know to do this scared. That honesty nearly undid me. So I mounted and rode. Town smelled of wet ash, horses, and bread. The clerk's office sat beside Bellamy's surgery like two men sharing a lie. I tied the mare and went straight in. Clerk Marin was a bald man with clean cuffs and a dirty soul. He rose when I entered and set both hands over the open ledger on his desk. Office is closed, he said. Then lucky for you, I came on public business. I laid Beckett's notice before him. Show me the account. Bellamy's voice came from the doorway. Mrs. Rowan, this is improper. The doctor smelled of bay rum and cowardice. Improper, I said. Is drugging a man too hard to breathe? His eyes flicked toward Marin. That was enough. I stepped around the desk. Marin grabbed my sleeve. I drove my elbow into his ribs, not hard, only educational. The ledger lay open to Hale Ranch. Interest altered upward. Feed charges doubled. Fence repairs entered twice. And one physician emergency call, January 14th, paid by note extension. The night June died. I looked up at Bellamy. You charged for the ride? He went pale. I set aside the time. But you never went. Marin reached for the book. I flattened my hand over the page and read faster, letting the numbers settle in my head. Once numbers go in, they stay. 9 became 12. 12 became 18. A dead horse repair billed twice. Feed entered on weeks Beckett had sold stock instead of buying. Fraud so lazy it had grown fat. I tore out the page with the physician entry and folded it inside my bodice. The front door opened. Silas Creed stepped in, rain on his shoulders and victory already arranged on his face. Well, he said softly. There you are. He closed the door behind him. I hoped you'd take the stage, Mrs. Rowan. Would have been kinder. Your notion of kindness remains theatrical. His gaze dropped once, only once, to where I had hidden the page. You think one scrap of paper changes anything? I think honest arithmetic does. You're a stranger with a wagon, he said. I'm the man who extends credit, buys calves, and carries this valley through bad seasons. Tell them I've squeezed too hard, and they'll still shop my store tomorrow. He stepped closer. Leave now and I forget this. Stay, and by Sunday no one in 3 counties will buy a powder from you. There it was. Safety laid out clean. My wagon, my mule, my trade, my narrow, hard-won independence. He could ruin all of it. Then I saw Beckett's nailed notice. June's photograph. Eli's face at the doorway. I heard my boy trying to swallow at the end. I have spent 3 years making myself small enough not to be noticed, I said. It has not improved me. So no, Mr. Creed. I won't leave. Something hard flashed behind his eyes. Then run, he said. The side window shattered. I moved first, overturning Marin's desk into his knees and diving through the side door into the alley. Men shouted. Boots hit mud behind me. I ran for the livery because the bay mare was tied there and because fear makes a body choose without asking permission. Then I heard Eli scream. A lantern had smashed against the stable post. Oil climbed wood. Smoke rolled black through the stalls. Eli was inside trying to drag a gelding through the chaos. I wrapped my apron over my mouth and ran in. Heat slapped the breath out of me. The gelding reared. Eli lost his grip. A beam cracked overhead. Then Beckett came through the smoke. I never learned how he saddled and rode that fast with fever still in him. I only know he was there, coat open, face white, eyes clear as stormlight. He shoved me toward the door, caught Eli by the collar, and kicked the stall gate wide so the trapped horses could thunder free. Outside, the whole yard had gone mad. Sheriff Tom Vane pushed through the crowd just as Silas stepped from the smoke-black lane, watching rather than helping. Beckett saw him. Silas called across the yard. You should have let that place and your woman die when they meant to. Would have spared us all this bother. Everyone heard him. Beckett went for him with his bare hands. Silas drew first. The shot cracked through smoke. Beckett hit him anyway, and the two of them went down hard in the mud. Eli shouted. I saw blood spread along Beckett's side. Sheriff, I yelled. Tom Vane finally moved, hauling Silas back by the collar while 2 townsmen dragged Beckett the other way. Silas's handsome cuff had burned through at the wrist. Mud streaked his face. He looked less like a gentleman then and more like what he was. Bellamy came out and saw the blood. "He needs stitching," the doctor muttered. "Then stitch him." Bellamy did not move. The sheriff saw that too. Then someone at the far end of town pointed east. A new pillar of black smoke lifted beyond the last sheds. "Beckett's barn." Silas smiled through his split lip. That smile told me everything. We got Beckett onto the bay mare because there was no wagon near enough and no time to fetch one. Eli climbed behind him. I tied the torn page tighter inside my dress and hauled Beckett's weight against the saddle as we rode for Crow Tooth Ridge, with smoke thickening ahead of us. The barn was gone before we reached it. Flames ran the beams. A year's hay, half a season's hope, and all the labor of staying alive went up in one roaring red wall. Beckett slid from the saddle to his knees in the mud. "I should have stayed," he said. I did not know whether he meant the barn or a different night years earlier. Blood soaked darker through his coat. Nora Pike came out of the cottonwoods with her mule and a shotgun across her lap. "Lambing camp," she snapped. "Now?" "Before Creed finishes it." We got Beckett there after dark, half carrying him between us. The bullet had grazed under his ribs rather than burying deep. Luck, if any part of that day deserved the word. I boiled water, poured whiskey, and stitched him while he bit down on a strap and refused to make a sound. When it was done, Eli fell asleep at the stove, and Nora went outside to watch the trees. The creek talked softly through the cottonwoods. The lamp flame ticked. Beckett lay white and exhausted, eyes open to the ceiling. "You should sleep," I said. "So should you." "I wasn't shot." "No. You only fought half the county." I laughed once and almost cried from the force of being tired. "Tessa," he said. It was the first time he had used my name. I sat on the edge of the bunk because my knees had begun to shake. "I am so tired of arriving in time to watch good things die." He turned his head toward me. Pain had made him honest again. "Grief can make a house go quiet," he said. "It never does teach a heart to quit knocking." I looked at him. "Did June say things like that?" "No. June said exactly what she meant and let the rest of us catch up." He drew a slow breath. "When I told you about her eyes, I wasn't asking you to be haunted for her. I know. She saw people clear. That was the first thing about her." He held my gaze. "You do too." No one had said that to me in a very long time. I reached into my satchel and took out the small tin compass I had carried since my son was born. The lid was dented. The needle still found north. "He used to hold this when we rode," I said. "Never knew how to read it. Just liked watching it settle." Beckett opened his hand. I set the compass in it. "That's yours," he said. "So was my fear once." I folded his fingers closed. "Tonight I'd rather you had something that points true." He was silent a moment. Then he reached under the pillow and brought out a blue glass button on a frayed thread. "June's," he said. "Only piece I kept where I could bear to look at it. You ought to have one thing from this place that isn't trouble." The button was warm from the bed. Neither of us said what had already become true. Objects only matter when the person beside them has begun to matter too. If this is moving you, you are exactly who we wrote it for. A like and a subscribe tell us to keep bringing these stories back to the fire. Now stay with me, because dawn was coming and danger was not done with us. By morning, Beckett's fever had crept up again from blood loss and strain. He was pale, weak, and angry about both. Nora brought biscuits and word from town. "Creed means to take possession at noon outside the church," she said. "Wants witnesses so nobody can call it unfair later." "Unfair," I said. "That man could poison a well and call it irrigation." Nora looked from him to me. "You hiding or fighting?" "Fighting," I said. Beckett looked at me, then nodded. Not because he was strong enough. He wasn't. Not because victory seemed likely. It didn't. He nodded because sometime in the night we had both grown tired of letting fear wear wisdom's coat. We rode to town in Nora's wagon with Beckett propped against wool sacks and Eli gripping the seat beside him. Half the valley had gathered outside the church by the time we arrived. Curiosity had done what conscience had not. Silas stood on the steps beside Clerk Marin, Dr. Bellamy, and Sheriff Vane. Fresh bandage at his wrist. Fresh shine on his boots. He had dressed for victory. When he saw Beckett sit up in the wagon, surprise flickered across his face before he hit it. "Noon," he called. "You've come to sign?" Beckett rose with one hand on the rail. Every face in the crowd tightened watching him do it. He swayed once, then steadied. "No," he said. "I've come to tell you I'm done paying for the night you lied in my house." A murmur moved through the crowd. Silas shrugged. "Your grief has always made you dramatic." I stepped forward with the torn ledger page in my hand. "This is the county account page for Hale Ranch," I said. "It shows false interest, doubled repairs, feed billed on weeks no feed was bought, and one physician emergency call entered on the night June Hale died, while Dr. Bellamy never wrote at all." Heads turned. Bellamy went white. Silas laughed. "A torn page in a widow's hand proves nothing." "No," I said, "but your doctor might." All eyes fixed on Bellamy. For a moment, I thought cowardice would win again. Then he looked at Beckett, at the crowd, at the wound under the shirt, and something rotten in him finally gave way. "I was paid to stay," he said. The square fell silent. Silas snapped toward him. "Mind yourself." Bellamy spoke louder. "Creed told me the pass was shut and the woman already failing. Said he needed me in town for a rail buyer hurt in a fall. He doubled my fee. When morning came and Mrs. Hale was dead, he had the charge entered anyway." Nora Pike stepped out of the crowd. Her hands shook, but not her voice. "I saw his rider turn back from the lane that night. I heard him say no horse was worth wasting on one woman's birthing. Something went through the townspeople then. Not surprise. Recognition." Silas spread his hands and tried one last smile. "You all owe me money. You all drank my coffee through bad winters. Don't pretend outrage because one weak man and a peddler found a stage. That might have carried him if he had stopped there. But cruel men love the sound of their own contempt too much to stop in time." He looked at Beckett and said, "I wasn't wasting a doctor and 3 horses on a woman who would have died anyway. And I won't apologize for wanting land a stronger man could have kept." The words landed like an axe in greenwood. Beckett did not reach for a gun. That was how I knew he had become someone new. He only said, very quietly, "You've mistaken mercy for weakness so long. Silas, you don't know strength unless it's threatening you." Silas lunged down the steps, hand diving into his coat. Sheriff Vane moved. So did Eli. "He lit the barn," the boy shouted. "I saw him kick the lantern in the livery too." Vane drove Silas face first into the church post and tore the pistol free before he cleared leather. "Silas Creed," the sheriff said, loud enough for the whole square, "you are under arrest for fraud, arson, attempted murder, and being fool enough to confess in front of witnesses." A laugh broke somewhere in the crowd. Then another. Then 10 more. Not at Beckett. At Silas. That was the true end of him. Men like Silas can survive fear for years. They cannot survive contempt. Marin the clerk tried to edge away. Vane pointed the seized pistol at him and said, "You stay put. The judge can decide which cell likes you better." By supper time, 3 ranchers had brought their own crooked accounts forward. By evening, the rail surveyor admitted Silas had been cornering water rights with forged extensions. By week's end, a judge out of Laramie had frozen his holdings, seized his books, and sent Marin and Silas south in irons. Bellamy kept his freedom only because every widow in the valley argued prison was too clean for him, and shame would cost more over time. Beckett's note was voided before sunset. The spring, pasture, and house remained his clear and lawful own. Not because luck saved him. Not because a stranger rode in and solved his life. Because he stood up in public with truth in his mouth, and because I finally stopped living as if leaving early was the same thing as surviving. Then came the practical mending. Neighbors found the road to Crow Tooth Ridge again, carrying seed, nails, lumber, and awkward apologies. Beckett took the lumber, charged fair for the nails, and let the apologies lie where they landed. Nora moved her sheep to the upper flats and never crossed town with her eyes down again. Eli came to work the ranch outright and grew half an inch on gratitude alone. I might still have gone. For 3 mornings after the trial, I harnessed my mule before sunrise and unharnessed him before breakfast. Habit is stubborn. So is fear. On the 4th morning, Beckett found me standing beside the wagon with one hand on the rail and my whole life balanced between road and home. He did not make a speech. Thank heaven. He only said, "You can stay without owing me June, and you can leave without owing me guilt. But if you want the truth, I'd rather build a life with the woman who came to my house carrying medicine and stayed when staying got expensive." There are moments the body knows before the mind catches up. The fear in me did not vanish then. It simply loosened. So I stayed. By the first hard frost, a new barn stood where the old one had burned, wider by 4 feet and better braced against weather and men. My wagon had been turned into a proper dispensary beside the kitchen garden, and valley women came as much for tinctures as for the relief of speaking plain where no one would hush them. Beckett's laugh, used sparingly, proved worth waiting for. Eli grew 2 inches and an opinion on every living thing. Nora took supper with us often enough that the house began to feel less like a place spared from grief than one enlarged by surviving it. One evening near Christmas, snow feathered down so softly it seemed almost shy. I stood at the window filling twists of cough powder while Beckett came in from the barn with cold in his beard and the compass I had given him hanging from a leather cord at his neck. He crossed the kitchen, set June's blue glass button beside my elbow where I kept the household ledger, and kissed my forehead with the absent-minded tenderness of a man already home in his own life. Some mercies don't arrive like thunder. They come the way morning comes, slow, certain, and bright enough to show you what stayed. From the porch, with the creek talking low through the cottonwoods and Beckett's hand warm around mine, the whole valley shone like it had finally remembered our names. And next time, stay with me for the story of the seamstress they sent west in disgrace to mend railroad shirts, until the one-armed ranch owner hired her to stitch a wedding coat neither of them believed would ever be worn.